Hello, all you creative people out there, and welcome to episode 6 of And So the Mind Reels podcast. This episode, I'm going to be looking at the mechanics and the theories of comedy. Why was that funny? You know, for many years, I worked in sketch comedy groups and wrote comedy plays. Why do certain jokes work and others do not? Could it be the way they're written? Or could it be the person telling them? What is funny and why do we laugh? And is timing at all important? I think it is. Hi, it's Lee Mueller, and this is episode 6 of And So the Mind Reels podcast. Now, if you listen to any of the previous 5 episodes, in some of them I talked about my background and what led me to try to become a creative person. I was involved in the performing arts because my imagination just was, I couldn't contain it and I had to get it out there somehow. And, it came out in acting, it came out in music, it came out in writing. I just needed a way to funnel my imagination. And I, of course, never put it away as some people do when they become adults and they put away childish things. I couldn't do that. And I just kind of kept going. Now, one of the things I did speak about that was involved in my background is that I was, for many years, involved in a comedy improv sketch troupe. Now, what that is, basically, it was just a group of people. There were 7 of us, and we would write these little sketches, like maybe 1 minute, 2 minute at the most, sketch comedy. So we had a series of scenes, maybe 5, 6 scenes, and then in between them, we would do these involved improvisational games, where we would have a scenario and we would do these games in front of people, and sometimes they work and sometimes they didn't. Now, this is the point, is that many times afterwards we would kind of sit around and, do a self-critique or self-review and wonder why this particular thing that we had written that we thought was really funny didn't get any laughs, and this other thing that we thought, it's okay, that just killed. That just got a whole bunch of laughs. And why did they laugh at that? And why did they not laugh at this? And why did this one improv thing work? And why did it not? For example, there's a very creative member of our group who, during an improv game, would just throw his hands out sometimes and just say, "Look at the watermelons. Would you look at the watermelons?" This would kill. Everybody in the audience would just laugh and howl at this, and I would just kind of stand there going, why is that funny? I don't understand why that's funny. I don't know. But anyway, so as a side note, or sidetrack, I looked into this because I was kind of curious about it, and if people had written, long theses and articles and looked into insights of why some things are funny and why some things are not, or why people laugh at this and why not at that. Well, there was quite a bit of material out there, and I'm just going to brush over. I'm going to pull up some and see how it goes. Now, there was a quote that's attributed to a gentleman named Edmund Gwenn. On his deathbed, they asked him about dying, how he felt about dying. Was it hard to accept this? And supposedly Mr. Gwenn responded this quote. He said, "Dying is easy. Comedy is hard." If you've ever tried to tell a joke or write a funny line, or we're in front of a group of people and we're trying to be funny, you can relate to that insight. Sometimes it is really, really hard. Now, I read an article in an educational theater publication on the mechanics of comedy. The article introduced the laughter theory of this French philosopher and Nobel laureate. I'm going to try the French pronunciation here and go with it. It's Henri Bergson, or as Americans would say, Henry Bergson. Now, Monsieur Bergson proposed that comedy happens when something mechanical is reflected in a human action. The gestures, attitudes, and movements of a human body are laughable in exact proportion as that body reminds us of a mere machine, is the quote. Now, Bergson theorized that laughter occurs as a result of our recognition of this mechanical feature. A person doing a task over and over, similar to a machine, and even in some cases along with the machine, is funny. Now, the theory may hold some truth. I'm not going to argue with the guy. I believe the actual humor, to me, arises when the machine goes out of whack and the person tries to adapt to the mechanical actions to compensate. Now, my example, I'll hold up here. There's an old TV show that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with called I Love Lucy. And there's a famous episode where Lucy and Ethel are stationed on an assembly line, and their task is to wrap these chocolates that are moving down a conveyor belt. Now, okay, so the robotic action of them doing the same task over and over, I guess, yeah, it's kind of funny. But I think the real humor kicks in when everything kind of goes crazy, goes haywire. The machine, the assembly line, the conveyor belt starts going faster and faster and faster, and they try to keep up and try to compensate for the speed and kind of lose control. There is where laughter ensues. Another favorite of mine is there's a movie with Charlie Chaplin called Modern Times. And a brilliant bit of comedic choreography is Chaplin's own mechanical timing ebbs and flows with the march of a machine. Also, later in the film, there's a scene where he is supposed to test out this feeding machine, and it has like corn that comes up on this little belt that spins around. And he has to eat it, and the thing comes over and wipes his mouth, and it all kind of starts working, and it's working, and all of a sudden, again, it goes out of whack and starts going crazy and slapping him, and he tries to adapt. Again, this is where the humor comes in. Now, some of you, hopefully, most of you are familiar with Monty Python's Flying Circus. And John Cleese, who was a prominent member of Monty Python, stated in an interview one time, and I'm going to have to paraphrase this, but he said something to the effect that someone acting silly or crazy is not as funny as someone watching someone acting silly or crazy. Okay, did you follow that? Now, for instance, say there's a person in a scene that's having an absolute fit or a tantrum, okay? And it's kind of funny watching this person maybe jumping up and down and trying to pull their hair out or doing something. But having an unknowing person enter that scene who just suddenly walks in and observes this person having this fit with no idea what's going on is where the humor is. Because the person who just entered doesn't have the slightest clue as to what's going on. Their reaction makes us laugh because we are in on it. We know what happened. This person had something go completely haywire, got very frustrated with something, and we saw what happened. But introducing this other person walk into the scene who doesn't know what we know as an audience is funny. We know something that they don't know. We recognize something. That's kind of my own theory that I was espousing the other night, is that I think a lot of humor comes from something we as humans maybe think that no one else knows about us, or that we do something that no one else really knows. And then we hear somebody tell a joke about it or remark, hey, did you ever, blah, 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 blah. And we recognize that in ourselves, kind of we're a little embarrassed that, oh yeah, I do that. Sometimes I'm wearing a hat all day and I take off the hat, but it still feels like I have the hat on, and I reach up to grab it and I realize I don't, something weird like that, where maybe I'm the only one that ever thought that. but someone else thinks that and does a bit about it, or does a joke about it, or a stand-up routine, or something you read and you go, oh, wow, that happens to me. I actually did that. Sometimes that is funny, and that invokes laughter. And now another type of comedy comes from, and what I'll call this is misdirection. Now that normally you would associate that term with the world of magic, but it also has its place in humor. Now the basic premise of this is simply guiding the audience along one path or one direction and delivering an outcome that's not expected. Okay, so an example would be found, there was an old comedian named Henny Youngman. His classic one-liner was this: "Take my wife, please." See, the expectation is that he was going to say, for example, "Take my wife, for example." The path or the direction leads you with "take my wife," and that oh so brief pause or little beat that he puts in there allows the human mind to anticipate or fill in the blank. So we're hearing "take my wife," and our brain's going, for example, and he says, "Please," turns that sentence into something completely different that we were not expecting. We were misdirected. We were led one way, and he countered with, a knockout punch, and our reaction of our mistake, our presumption of what he was going to say being wrong is, of course, laughter. Kind of like, again, coming back to the embarrassment bit, that we thought this, but it was actually this, or that we related to something and that embarrassed us, and that's funny. Another few examples of misdirection, just so you get it, because I've got a bunch. A man walks into a doctor's office with a bird on his head, and the doctor says, "Hey, may I help you?" And the bird says, "Yeah, can you get this guy off of my butt?" Misdirection, because the bird speaks. While hunting in Africa, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How the elephant got into my pajamas, I'll never know. You can figure that one out too, that misdirection. You thought it was going one way and it went another way. So why do we laugh when our minds are misled or tricked? That's a good question. I once heard someone define laughter as a reaction of disapproval. However, I was never certain if this disapproval comes from ourselves, as in, well, shame on me for thinking one thing that turned out to be another thing, or if it's directed outside of ourselves as, shame on you for tricking me into thinking one thing, and then you did this other thing, which made us react in laughter. You can take any of those things and probably run with them and prove a point, and they probably would all be true. Now, there is also a theory that laughter is essentially a release for acquired tension. If a human feels threatened in some way, the release valves are tears, laughter, or some cases vomiting, but we won't go with that one. It's just we're tense and we feel a certain emotion triggered by something, and we're either going to cry, laugh, or throw up. Now, as a writer, I rely on the misdirection brand of comedy because I'm limited to the use of words. I can only write things, I can't act them out. People take these words that I write in scripts and they act them out, and they have to interpret what I meant. Surely I could describe a wacky assembly line scene or a character acting like a machine, but the actual comedy would depend upon the actor performing that action. Specifically, an actor's timing. Now here's the real key to comedy. Timing. Yes, timing. Now, if you go back, if you watch this Lucy and Ethel on the assembly line, you will notice what makes the whole thing funny is Lucy's timing. Trying to catch up with the conveyor belt as it gets faster and faster, wrapping the chocolates faster and faster, falling behind, going too slow. If she kept up with the task and actually was able to speed up her wrapping abilities and get all the chocolates as they went by, that wouldn't really be funny. She would be doing her job, but she can't. The timing is off. The timing is what makes it funny. And then if she just stopped and gave up, again, not funny. If you watch the old great slapstick comedians like Chaplin or Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd, you'll see what actually makes their situations funny is the timing of their actions and especially their reactions. There's nothing funnier than seeing someone react to something, or in some cases, not react to something. Now, the same thing applies to misdirection humor. If Henny Youngman did not pause for that 1 second after he said, "Take my wife, please," the joke wouldn't work. If he just come out and said, "Take my wife, please." What? No, that's the little beat or little pause is what in there makes it funny. What makes comedy hard is learning that timing, is getting that ability to learn how to wait, to put a beat here, to hesitate for a moment, or to have a certain reaction to something in a certain way, and not too long, but not too short. Kind of like I'll borrow from the music world, and Miles Davis had a famous quote. He said, "It's not the notes that you play, it's the notes that you don't play." When you have an innocent person walk into the room and observe somebody acting crazy, that's funny. When the conveyor belt suddenly speeds up and how fast the workers react to it, that's funny. How long to lead the readers down one path, returning back into a humorous twist, that can be funny. But the timing of it and how you do it and the words you use, the notes you play or the notes you don't play, is what makes it funny, and that all comes under timing. The best advice I can offer is to observe some great comedians. Read the best comedic writers. Discover the rhythm of the humor, the timing. Personally, my influences, visual or action timing, like I said, Chaplin, Keaton, Peter Sellers, Rowan Atkinson, Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, Kurt Vonnegut, Tom Robbins, Neil Simon, Douglas Adams, Monty Python, Tom Stoppard, Oscar Wilde, Stephen Wright. I mean, I could go on and on with the influences, but the point here is I learned a lot from these people. And essentially what I learned is the art and or science of comedy and timing. If you observe how they do it, you kind of look behind the curtain and then observe, well, that joke only had so many words in it, and then he hesitated or he paused for just a split second before he said this. Then you start understanding why it's funny or how it's funny. So in the comedy group that I was in, we would say, "Hey, you know what? When you gave that line, I think you kind of rushed it because the audience was still laughing at the first part, and I don't think they heard you because they were busy laughing, and it kind of drowned you out, so they didn't hear the line, and that's why they didn't laugh at it. Maybe after that bit, wait. If they're laughing, wait until the laughter starts dying down, and then come in with your line." So we would help each other out, and it always boiled down to the timing. So timing is probably the most essential key to comedy. And the other methods or other theories, I should say, of why someone laughs, that's kind of up in the air. That can be analyzed and scrutinized for years and years and years. But basically, my theory has to do with timing and people being embarrassed and recognizing things or faults in themselves, or being misdirected and feeling ashamed that they didn't. It has to do with the human psychology. And I don't feel qualified to pinpoint it exactly and say this is what it is. It's a lot of different things working together at the same time. Now, I'd like to end this with a favorite old joke I heard a long time ago. And this kind of sums everything up, I think. Hopefully, maybe, I don't know. So, a guy, he goes to prison. Okay, he committed some crime and he goes to prison. And then one day he's in the cafeteria and he's having his lunch or his dinner with the other prisoners. One of the prisoners stands up and says, "Number 47. And the other prisoners all laugh out loud. A few minutes later, another prisoner over here on the other side stands up and says, "Number 11. Again, laughter erupts. And someone else a little bit later stands up and goes, "Number 3. Everybody just roars laughing. So later that day, this new inmate is like, what is going on? What is the deal? So he gets back to his cell and he said, hey, you know what? I'm kind of new here, and help me out something. When we were eating, somebody stood up and they would say a number and people laughed, and the other guy said a number and the people, I don't get it. What's going on? Oh, the cellmate said, well, you see, it's like this. We don't get a lot of time in here to, socialize at dinner, tell stories or jokes. So we all had this one joke book. And in this joke book, all the jokes are listed by number. So we've all memorized all these jokes and the numbers. So if somebody stands up and says a particular number, we remember what the joke was, and then we all have a laugh. Well, intrigued with this information, the new inmate gets a copy of this joke book, and he studies it, and he commits all the jokes to memory along with all the numbers. So he can't wait. So his opportunity comes. One night at dinner, he feels, the time is right. This is a good time. So he stands up and he says, number 27. Nothing. Not a snicker, not a peep, not a belch, not a nothing. Well, okay, maybe that wasn't a good joke. Maybe they heard that one too much. So he sits back down and he thinks a while and he stands up again and he says, number 82. Again, nothing, nobody, nothing, nobody laughs, nothing. Okay, I'll quit while I'm ahead. So on his way back from dinner, he's walking and he gets back to his cell and he says to his cellmate, gee, man, I don't get it. I learned all these jokes, like you said, and I tried it out at dinner tonight, and nobody laughed. Why? I don't get it. The cellmate pats him on the back, and he says, face it, man. Some people can tell jokes, some people can't. That's it for this episode. Hopefully you had some insights, and it was funny to you, to me, to the world at large. And so the mind reels. Until next time, this is Lee Mueller, and have a good